Here we go. Okay, so now, Jeff Culver, you're a beautiful man. Thank you. She is a principal from Cesar Chavez Middle School in Hayward, California, representing Area B. We have Monique Walton. Welcome, Monique. He is a CADA sponsor, a speaker, and author. He is coming to us all the way from Florida. So it's already past 10 o'clock, way past your bedtime, but we're grateful that he's here. Dr. Laymon Hicks is with us this evening. Our third presenter this evening, she is an author, a speaker, and actually you may recognize her because she was just on one of our previous Zoom events that we had previously. So we don't want to think that we're giving her unfair advantage or favoritism, but we actually had a different speaker presenter who had a family emergency. And so we're very grateful to the amazing T Street for stepping in and presenting this evening. So thank you, T, for coming in on, I don't know, about 12 hours notice, I think. And she is all the way from Ohio. So it's also past T's bedtime. So thank you for being here. Amazing T Street. Our fourth presenter this evening, he is an activities director from Kraemer Middle School in Area F. It's Ricky Castro. And then batting cleanup, our fifth speaker this evening, fifth and final speaker, he is also a CADA sponsor and speaker, proudly representing Area E, Dee Hanking. So Dee, thank you for joining us this evening. All right, I am going to go ahead and, oh, by the way, thank you. If you see something, because we're all muted, so if you see or hear something that you'd like, you can go ahead. I do this with my students too. We do the sign language form of applause. So thank you so much to everyone, to all of our presenters and all of our audience members for being here this evening. Okay, with no further ado, I'm going to go ahead and click share screen, and I'm going to go to our presentation. And I will, can everyone, I just want to make sure everyone can see the screen. We can see the presentation screen now. Awesome, thanks Dee. Alrighty, our first presenter this evening is Monique Walton. So Monique, take it away.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you guys for coming in. I hope everyone is enjoying the first part of their summer, even though we're still in quarantine. Hope you're making the best of it. Next, I do come from Cesar Chavez Middle School in Hayward, Area B. I'm a council member. Excited to be here tonight with you guys, and just want to share a little bit about how I'm feeling in this time and space of these two pandemics that we have going on, and just shed a little light and some knowledge of just the Black experience right now during this time. Next. Lots of folks ask me, like, what can we do to help? And I've been asked to build a lot of policies and different things. And while policies are great, the concern is we need to change behavior. And that starts from within. And so change of belief systems, a change of core values kind of need to be reflected upon. And dealing with this as a African-American woman site leader, I've had to figure out a way to ask questions, self-reflection questions that really kind of get people to not feel judged, but really address a serious concern. So a couple of things, change begins within your self-reflection. And two questions I ask are, how do you want people to experience you? And then how do you think people experience you? And if there's a difference between those two reflections, then it's time to reflect on the why. Why is it different? What's making people see you differently than how you want to be seen? And it just kind of, again, it takes you back to that self-reflection. Next slide. One thing, we laugh about it, but then we get serious. And how do we help? And I just say, educate yourself. If you want to know how to support this cause, how to support people of color on your campus, you got to do your own homework. Black folks and folks of color, while we love to share, we are not the answers, and it shouldn't be our responsibility to be the ones to share the knowledge, because we also get attacked when we share the knowledge. So here are a couple of books that I'm kind of diving into as I carry on as a leader of a school site. So here are a couple books that can be, that you could take a look at, that kind of share where are the directions that we need to go to. What are we really experiencing on our school campuses, and how do we change this experience for African American students, but also for all of our students of color? How do we create a better space for them to thrive? The next thing is, as leaders on your campus, get comfortable being uncomfortable. Be willing to have the courageous conversations. Be willing to call out that it's racism. Be willing to call out that we are treating people differently because of who they are, or who they represent. And know that your silence is compliance. So if you see it's happening, you might be doing it, you might not understand. The more you stay quiet, the more keep it covered, because folks aren't really ready to have that conversation. Be that leader. The table, any table that you're able to be at, use that as your advantage to push this agenda, to make sure that we are creating anti-racist policies in all of our school districts, and in all of our spaces. So those are the things that can be done, but it first starts with definitely doing your homework and reading. And even I'm still reading. I'm learning more as I go as well. But that's where we are. Next slide, please. How most of your Black friends, family, or colleagues are feeling in these moments right now. This is where we're at. This is how we're feeling. We're exhausted. We're frustrated. We're tired. We're trying to figure it out. We're trying to care for our family members. We're trying to hold on to the dreams of our ancestors and find our spaces in this marathon for equality. We get attacked for it just thinking Black Lives Matter, but it's not just Black lives. It's just we're the ones that are being killed right now. We want to live. And so if we are seeing that we have systems, that we're putting systems in place that dismantle the racism, dismantle the oppression that's going on, then for all students of color, all students on school campuses, if we can get this right, then it'll be a better place for all of our students. It's a privilege to learn about it and not to experience it. And to experience it as a site leader, I can only imagine the experiences of my students that they are feeling in these same positions. Next slide. How do we address this with our school community? Again, have the courageous conversations with your student leaders. If you're uncomfortable with it, find someone willing to co-facilitate it with you. But it's definitely important that you start off having the conversations with our leaders, because they are led by social media. They're led by what they are seeing and believing, and depending on the type of culture, the type of school, the type of neighborhood, community that they're living in, feelings are being learned, and positions are being had, and some are not as equitable, or some as dehumanizes students, colleagues, peers. So really have those conversations with them about what it means. What are we looking at? Evaluate and revise and eliminate some traditional activities that might dehumanize groups of people within your school community. Really take a lens at all of your events and activities, and kind of see where are some spaces that we might be dehumanizing some of our community. And I'm not saying work to just take it out, but figure out ways that it can still be done, but in a space that really reaffirms and humanizes our students. Encourage them to create an anti-racist stance and policy. Encourage them to, as all of the protests and things that they're seeing, have them develop something that they want to see on their campus. And then dismantle the hate on your school campus in any way, shape, or form. It starts with the adult leaders, how we treat each other, how we treat our students, how we teach our students, what we are allowing them to do, and then that leads into the school community. So always know that it starts with us, and we have to really be reflective of how we are treating each other, how we are treating students in our classrooms, how we're treating our community. Next slide. Always remember Black minds matter. Yes. 20 seconds. Ah, thank you guys for listening.
Thank you so much, Monique. And Monique, I've had that same sense of relief. Like, actually, it doesn't happen very often, but where you get it under your time limit. So great job, good for you. Thank you so much for sharing, Monique.
Thank you.
All right, our next presenter, all the way from Florida, is now 10:15 p.m. East Coast time. So we appreciate you staying up with us. Dr. Laymon Hicks, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here with you all and just, again, like Monique, share a few moments with you. I was sharing with everyone before you all got on the call that I think these types of conversations are so important, especially with people like you who have such a large influence on the number of students that you do in your position as activity directors and as teachers as well. And so it's so important that we have this conversation. But I do want to take an opportunity to really just say, if you have a Black friend, a Black colleague, a student who you just absolutely adore, reach out to them in this moment. I can probably count on one hand the number of people who have white friends of mine who have actually reached out and said, how are you feeling right now? And those who have, it's just giving me an opportunity to once again remind them, this affects me, even though it has not happened to me directly. I have dealt with issues where these things come back to the forefront, being pulled over for not using my blinker to get over in the middle of Nebraska, within 18 hours getting pulled over again because I was going 63 in a 60-mile-per-hour zone when there were cars passing the cop and I. And mostly probably because of the color of my skin. So I would tell you to definitely check on those people that you love. I think I posted a Facebook status a few days ago that says something along the lines of, it's not that you have Black friends, it's that you know of Black people. And so if you have Black friends, people that you truly admire, people that you adore, reach out to them in this moment just to understand how they are feeling. Because if you want to grow as an individual, as a teacher, as a leader, it's important to just show them that you do care beyond changing a Facebook profile picture to Black. Monique mentioned silence being complicit, and I think she's absolutely right. When you are quiet, to me, you leave room for others, whether right or wrong, to assume how you feel in these moments. And I do not believe anyone should have the opportunity to speak or think how you feel. You just should say that. And so it's important right now to speak up, to call out what you see the way it is, regardless of how others may view that. What we've seen, what has happened and transpired over the last few years is sad. It really is sad. And, I remember I was in a store here recently, a couple of weeks ago, the day after the George Floyd video was released. And the butcher came up to me and said, "I love you." And I was like, "Well, why are you telling me you love me? Like, what's up?" And he was like, "I saw that video and I didn't know things were that bad." And all day it nagged at me because, one, I was appreciative that this older white man, 70-something years old, was telling me that he loved me and he happened to see what I saw on TV as injustice. But the other part of me was like, where have you been? Like, it's been that bad. And so I think right now, that's the same question that a lot of Black people have is, where have you been? And so being here on this call tonight means that you're here. You're here to learn. You're here to grow. And my hope is that you all will take that back to your schools and it'll shift some attitudes. I remember being in my doctoral program, and one of the things that we had to do was write a positionality statement. And a positionality statement, what you do is you have to sit and think about all the biases that you have, and you have to write them out. Challenge yourself to really reflect on, why do I feel the way that I feel? And so anytime I'm talking to educators, to leaders, I ask that question, what's holding you back? One, but why do you feel the way you feel? Like, did something happen in your childhood that caused you to feel a certain way? Like, what is causing you to be or do and act and think the way that you do? There's something that sparked that. And so it's so important that you have that conversation with yourself because it will show up in your actions later on. I'm a firm believer that whenever you want to know something, you have to ask, A-S-K, actively seek knowledge. We are in a time right now where it is important that we actively seek knowledge, that we ask the right questions, that we are willing to put ourselves out there to say, you know what, how can I learn but learn on my own at times. Monique said it correctly. Like, Black people tired. We are tired of trying to explain, tired of trying to, give you the right answer only to be told that's not true or that's not the way it is. And the thing is, books, movies. I think I saw Allison just watched 13th online. There's another movie I had my wife watch last night called The Hate That You Give, Thug. And that's another good movie that you can watch. Like, there's just so many different resources out there that explains just the way this country has been ran for the last 400 something years. And today when I was driving to the grocery store, it hit me that my grandmother lived in a time where schools were segregated. And so we're asking people who went to school with my grandmother to treat me like I'm someone. And these people grew up in a time where things were segregated. Then they watched their folks spit on Black people and treat Black people differently. And we're asking them and their children to treat me humanly. That's something just resonated with me. And I think as a speaker, I realized how important my role is in this journey. I remember being in Kansas, my first year of speaking, and I had a young 7th grader, 8th grade white kid walk up to me and he said, why you don't wear your pants down low? I said, why you don't wear your pants down low? He says, all the Black guys wear their pants down low. And it hit me how important in that moment it was for me as a speaker to be on stages at some of these schools because I may be the only positive interaction that they ever have with the Black male. And I remember speaking at a school and, a kid came up to me and said, we've never had a Black speaker at our school. And so as Ron just switched the slide, I think this is so important. Your students need to hear a variety of messages from a diversity of messengers. And that's where I think you all come into play. You have the power to bring in many different people, to introduce your student population to people that don't look like them, who don't think like them, to challenge the status quo. Utilize that. So I'm excited to be able to talk to you guys more, ask questions, feel free. But again, actively seek knowledge. That's all we're asking you to do in this moment. Thank you so much.
Laymon, thank you. And I know that one of the messages that I got from that workshop that I referenced at the beginning, that promoting equity and justice in education, is having a faculty, having staff members that reflect the actual community that you teach. And unfortunately, what I have found at the schools that I have taught is that's not always the case. So that's a bigger issue that we need to tackle as educators, as schools, as school districts. But at least in the short term, you can at least bring in a speaker that better because representation matters. And that's one of the many messages that I got from you. So Dr. Hicks, thank you so much. All right. We're going from Florida up to Ohio. And as before I introduce her, I have been noticing in our, in between here, I noticed we got some folks, at least one from Canada. So where's Lindsay? I think I saw you, Lindsay. So great to have you, Lindsay. Hi, Lindsay. And then I think all the way from Hawaii, is that Leilani from Hawaii? Hi, Leilani. So we've got people from all over North America and the Pacific. Great to have you all here. But next we do go to Ohio. Our very good CADA friend, speaker, sponsor, author, the amazing T Street. Welcome.
Thank you. And I promise I'm really not trying to dominate the CADA airwaves. I got a call like not even 12 hours, about 8 or 9 hours ago, asking me to do this. And so it's late my time, so I promise to be brief. I'm watching the clock run. Next slide, please. Thank you. If you're looking for a good summer read, I recommend Untamed. It's a memoir written by a white woman who is wrestling with issues of race and gender and sexual orientation and feminism and patriarchy and all of the isms. And it's a really, really good read. It's a great book for white people who are looking to educate themselves. Next slide, please. All right, just for the sake of the discussion that I'm going to have around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they're not the same thing, I wanted to give you a framework, and I'd love to tell you that it's mine, but it's not. I love these definitions because it comes from the Ford Foundation. It basically says that diversity is a representation of our varied identities and differences, race, ethnicity, gender. That's what diversity is. Equity seeks to ensure fair treatment, equality of opportunity, and fairness in access to information and resources for all. We believe that it's only possible in an environment that is built on respect and dignity. And finally, inclusion builds a culture of belonging by actively inviting the contribution and participation of all people. That's really all that those three definitions mean, that they're three different things. They're intersected, but they are not the same thing. Next slide, please. I promise you I'm going to stay under my 8 minutes. Just so you know, the folks in the background, behind my background, I put that background up with intent. The little four-eyed guy with glasses is my son, Christopher. And the women who are surrounding him are the women known as Mothers for the Movement. The lady in blue right there is Trayvon Martin's mother. And next to her is Sandra Bland's mother. And then there's a congresswoman whose son Jordan was killed in Florida. And right here in the middle, right behind Christopher, is Eric Garner, the first I Can't Breathe victim. That's his mother, and Hadiya Pendleton's mother. And so those are the Mothers for the Movement. And I wanted to put those images on as they laid hands on my son, Christopher. That's Christopher a few years ago in 2016. And I wanted to bring that slide up because it's something about that has really galvanized and always galvanizes my energy as the mother of 2 Black sons. My oldest son is a major in the U.S. Air Force, and my youngest son, Christopher, is a rising sophomore in college. And every time either of them leave out the house, Kenny is a grown man living on his own. Christopher is in and out all the time, but every time they leave the house, my heart stops. We have systems of check-in that says, call me when you get here, call me when you get there. The most poignant moment, and I posed this question of my mayor and the person who was running against him a few years ago. I was driving Christopher to school, and I was having the conversation. We were coming up 3:15, and I was speeding like I usually am because I'm running late. And I said to him, in a couple of years, son, you'll be driving. I said, you're driving up the road, you're coming up 3:15, and you get pulled over. You see those lights flashing behind you because you're speeding. What's your first inclination? I wanted him to tell me to put my hands on the steering wheel, don't reach for anything, all the things that I've talked with him about, that his uncles have talked with him about, his grandfather has talked with him about, and that's not what he said. What he said to me was, my first inclination would be to call you to tell you that I love you, just in case. And I said, why call me to tell me you love me, son? You're getting pulled over for speeding. You're not getting pulled over for drugs. You're not getting pulled over for a crime, just speeding. And he goes, Mom, you don't really think any of us really believe that we would ever survive getting pulled over by the police, do you? And it broke something in my heart. Something came crashing down because what I've known experientially, well, actually abstractly for a lot of years from people in my family and other people, I suddenly saw it on a very real level in my own son. So these are the things that I really want to share with you tonight really quickly. As you remove the mask of pretense to create authentic school climates and cultures, one, never expect people to sit at a table that they did not help to set. When you guys are planning programming for your schools, and you're working with your ASBs, help them to look through a lens and say, how can we bring more people to the table? What is it about our ASB that's not inviting enough to make kids of color want to be actively engaged, even if they are a small minority on your campus? All voices mean all. And having an ASB that is truly reflective of who they all are makes a difference, and it makes a statement. And what that means is, it's okay if some kids sag that they're on your ASB, because I want to challenge the notion that sagging ought to create some kind of cultural divide that keeps kids from being included. I tell kids all the time, I don't want you to sag on your jobs, but certainly I see goth kids and nobody challenges that. I want us to have those same kinds of standards where all means all for kids. Professional development for all. One of the things I really encourage schools to do is when you're doing professional development, don't just include your teachers. Have a moment or a time where you invite kids to the table to be a part of talking about what it is that makes for a healthy and diverse and inclusive school climate and culture. Invite some parents to be a part of that so that everybody has a buy-in in creating the climate and culture that they want to see. And so for me, that's really important. As you all are coming together to think about new ways of how you do old things, I would encourage you to reflect and change and revise your mission statements for your school, for the groups that you belong to, for your ASBs, for your churches, wherever you are, for your synagogues, your mosques, wherever you are and wherever you intersect, so that we create a more inclusive, not just diverse, but inclusive, where people all fit and are allowed to be who they are and have that be celebrated. And lastly, I really encourage educators to close the belief gap. The achievement gap will never be closed as long as there is a belief gap that says that some kids are capable and some kids are not. All kids have different capabilities, but at the end of the day, the way that we get kids closer is when you want for your kids and my kids the same thing. When you want my Christopher to have access to the same high quality education that you want for your kids, and you produce that in your schools, we'll start to see equity, which is different than equality. We'll start to see equity happen when everybody is on the same page. Next slide, please. And finally, I just really want to encourage everyone to think about where you fit and recognize that all of us have a role to play. And I want to echo the sentiments of both Laymon and Monique in saying that Black Lives Matter. And when we say that, it doesn't mean that only Black Lives matter. But what I can tell you is the day that Black lives start to matter, we truly will see what equity looks like in America. I'm the amazing T Street. There's nothing amazing in me that's not in each and every one of you. Thanks.
T, thank you so much. And I think my favorite takeaway from that was never expect anyone to sit at a table they didn't help to set. I've heard the expression, people tend to support that which they help to create, but I like that one even better. So T, thank you so much. All right, now we're going to hear from another one of our CADA member educators. He is from Kraemer Middle School in Area F. And so please welcome Ricky Castro. Ricky, hello.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ricky Castro. I teach at Kraemer Middle School. I'm actually a former Kraemer student myself, so it's been kind of a different experience for me to go back to the school I once was. I'm so happy to be there. Next. I'm going to do my best to follow them and follow the timeline. Yesterday when I practiced, it didn't work. In my 13 years in my district, I worked at 3 middle schools. I worked at Valadez, where 100% of those students were on free and reduced lunch. 80% of them were Hispanic. I worked at Yorba Linda Middle School, where it was a totally different demographic. Only 40% of them were free and reduced lunch. Only 23% were Latino. A lot of them were the upper middle class families. And then all of a sudden, Kraemer opened up, or Kraemer was there. There was an open position, and I was fortunate to apply and get this position. And now I've kind of like combined both of my worlds. I went from a low income area to a upper income area, and this school is one of the most diverse schools in Orange County. So it's definitely taught me a lot about how to deal with both all types of demographics. Next, please. So one of the things, Monique said this, we as educators must get comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations. One of the things I've done the past 3 years since I've been at Kraemer, where my students and I, we call them circle sessions, but a lot of times people will call them restorative justice circles. And it's just a way of providing an opportunity to have these uncomfortable conversations on various topics. And my students have, excuse me, every time I say we're gonna have circle today, they get extremely excited. A lot of times I'll start off with just different topics such as social media stuff where I know the kids are gonna just kind of have a lot of opinions about, and it really creates this sense of culture within my class. And the reason for doing that is I want them to know that we're a family and we can have these tough conversations and just feel comfortable with it. Just because I feel like once I get my class, my ASB class at that, feeling that type of comfort, I know that the goal of it, and as you all know as activities directors, our role is to set the culture of our school. So, and that's huge. And we have to do that with our students. We have to give them the tools to create that amongst the culture, because us as educators, we're not going to do it. It's mostly coming from this. A lot of times it's coming from those students. And especially with what's going on right now in our country and in the world, it's important that we have these difficult conversations. I just recently went to a protest and I realized that being silent wasn't going to bring change. And so by going there, I literally just was educated from one of these, he was an 18-year-old Black student who had the opportunity to get on the megaphone, and he literally just blew my mind with what he spoke about his life. And it's something that I will never forget. And he grew up in the same city as me. But even though I was this Latino student growing up in the same area, totally different experiences. He said out loud to all of us that congregated there, he's like, you know, every time I walk outside my house, he said, I purposefully say hi to all my neighbors so they don't think I'm doing anything wrong. And it just made me it kind of struck a chord, I guess, and it just taught me something new. I thought I was an inclusive. It's kind of like what T Street was saying. You want to be inclusive, you want to show equity, but there's still so many things that we must learn, and we need to educate ourselves. So I'm so thankful that I had that opportunity to hear some of these stories. Next. One of the things that I do know is, I think as an educator, especially being an activities director, we need to develop these relationships. And one of my mentors would always tell me, by pointing to her heart, once you get them here, pointing to her heart, you get them here in their brain. So we need to develop those relationships with our students in order for us to truly make that impact and get them to understand. We need to hear their stories. We need to be uncomfortable sometimes hearing some of these stories and know that we might not have the answer right then and there, but guess what? We're going to be there to listen. Next. Which leads me to these circle sessions. A lot of times what I've noticed, it's taught me the name, face, story. And I know a couple of years at Castle, that was one of their focuses, is understanding their name, their face, their story. And like I said, it's this place, and those are my current students. We were just in a circle session, and we just sit in a circle, and we talk about the various topics that I have there. And a lot of times we develop certain expectations. What happens in circle stays in circle. If somebody is having a hard time, we let them move on. I've never been truly trained in it. I'm going to give you guys a resource of where you guys can look into being trained, but it's just one of those areas where you get to know their name, their face, and their story, and you get to know the lives that some of them live. And that's what I think has been very impactful for my students, to understand each other's experience, because like I said, we are a very diverse campus and not everybody understands each other's stories. Oftentimes we live in our own bubbles. Next, please. So one of the lessons I do is a story, and I tell them, who's this man? And I have them basically stereotype him. I give them a couple questions, and then at the very end, they're stereotype him, and I basically show them, they see the picture, and I basically say, guess what, you guys, he's my brother. And I tell them, I end up sharing my story. I'm able to be vulnerable. Brene Brown, the next slide you guys are going to see in just a second, she's all about being vulnerable, because when you're vulnerable, it's showing courage. It has really allowed me to open up to my students and have them get to know that, yeah, my brother's been in prison for about 15 years. My cousins have been in prison, in and out. My mom grew up in an area, or grew up in a life where she felt like she had to cater to men all of her life. She had various marriages, 2 of them having been drug dealers. So I was able to kind of be authentic and vulnerable with my students, and I end up teaching them. I call this lesson the crossroads, where everybody has a choice in life. What are you going to do with that one choice? Next, please. Like I said, Brene Brown, highly recommend you guys reading her. She's all about talking about being vulnerable, and how it's going to teach so many students. It's going to teach so many people who you are. And so my biggest thing out of this is I hope that you guys are able to be vulnerable with your students. Next, please. So to kind of end, I highly recommend you guys get to know each other's name, face, story. Right now, I put a rainbow there because 2 years ago, around this time in June, is when I finally came out. I'm a gay Latino man, and I'm still trying to juggle that. I'm still trying to figure out, guess what? You know what do I got to do? How can I be vulnerable with my students? Because I do live in an area where there might be some judgments, and I'm trying to figure out what to do. But I highly recommend you be vulnerable, and remember to get comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations. Thank you.
Ricky, thank you so much. And you shared a lot of great things too. Silence doesn't bring change, I think was one of my favorite takeaways from your presentation. So thank you very much, Ricky. I think it's worth pointing out that we're 40 minutes in. About this time, you know, if you take a look at the numbers, because we always follow the numbers, we're probably at about, you know, maybe 75-80% of where we started. We're at 103% of the attendance of where we started. So it is a testament to all of you who are there listening. Also a testament to our presenters and their powerful stories. So thank you so much, Ricky. And we are now going to hear from our final presenter this evening, my friend representing my area, Area E, Dee Hanking. Thank you so much for being here this evening, Dee.
All right. Awesome.
There you go.
I appreciate it, man. Appreciate it. Just thank you for all of you for sharing your hearts. Let's see. I personally, I just kind of want to live in a world. I have a dream too. You know, I have a dream where, you know, what we're seeing right now is foreign and not normal. You know, I have a dream where, you know, my good friend Houston Kraft, right? His whole thing is make kindness normal, which is dope. But at the same time, in the back of my head, I'm like, yo, he's right. Kindness isn't normal. So we have a man who has dedicated his life to making kindness normal. And, you know, I have a dream where we don't need a Houston Kraft, where we don't need a Dee Hanking, where we don't need a speaker talking about bullying, where we don't need, you know, these conversations about equity, you know, in 2020, when everything has been so progressive. Everything we look at, man, we just sent another couple people up in space. You know, we're sending people to space, you know, to space. They're actually right now better off up there than they are down here, which everything is going crazy, man. And I just, you know, I think I get frustrated because I have this compassionate heart for all people, you know, like I have this kind of this eerie feeling sometimes driving, you know, I get off the 10, I live in Rancho, so I get off the 10 or the 210, and there's this guy, you know, he holds a sign, you know, every day on the side of the road, man, and I have this like this eerie feeling like, man, here I am pulling up to my own place, you know, with a roof over my head, warm shower, food in my refrigerator, knowing that there's people out there that don't have those things, you know. And I sit there sometimes because I have Spectrum, and sometimes my internet goes out and I flip it, I lose it, right? Here I am paying for internet. All I want you to do is work when I want you to work. And then I think about it like, yo, I'm complaining where the Wi-Fi is at when people are on the streets in the hot sun asking for water with signs that say anything could help, you know. And like my dream is that that doesn't happen, you know. I wanna live in a place. I want my kids to go into a school where, you know, he doesn't have to choose, you know, basketball, football, you know, because that's what we've been telling him. If you want to be successful, that's what you know, like, I want to live in a world where I can drive down the street and go to my white friend's house and we can invite our Indian buddies over. And we got a few, few people that just came from the Pride Parade telling us what happened. You know, we're eating menudo over here, and on this table, you know, we got some pizza. On this table, we got some soul food, some greens, some fried catfish. On this table, we have, you know, potato salad with raisins in it. You know, I want to live in a world like that, man. I know I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for diversity, if it wasn't for a group of people that just care. You know, I'm looking for people that care. I'm looking for people that care about other people. I'm looking for people that have the same dream, that have the same wants, that feel the same thing. You know, I think about those things, man, and it's frustrating because it's not happening. I don't see it. You know, I don't dream of the mansions. I don't dream of the millionaire status. I don't dream of those things. I dream about people just coming together and helping other people just because they have a compassion for it. Just because it's in their soul to say, yo, I want to help this person because if I was in this situation, I know somebody would help me. And that's the only reason why I speak today. I speak today because somebody loved me enough to say, hey, you can be more. Despite everything that you've been through, despite everything that you went through, you could be more. And I think about me, right? And in this slide, you'll see there's this mirror, right? And there's this thought. I wonder what others see when they look at me. And I know if you're human, you've had this thought. I wonder what people see when they look at me. And when I think about it right now, in the position that I am in, like just as a dad and as a human being, I think, you know what I do for people aligns with who I believe that I am, right? So I don't have to wonder what people think about me because I know they think and they go, dude, that dude D, he's out there making change. He's out there doing stuff. He's out there trying to help people. He's out there trying to make a difference, you know? And I'm only like that because I've had to get dirty with myself, you know, as rated R as that sounds. I had to get dirty with myself. And what that means is each and every one of us is a root to this tree of life, right? And if we want that tree of life to be healthy and flourish, right? Each of us, we're this root. We got to get down to the root of the problem. And the only way to do that is for you guys to constantly look at yourselves in the mirror and say, do my actions line up with who I believe myself to be, right? Every day, you know? And when we're talking about what's happening right now, because let's be real, when we talk about equity, we're really talking about racism. At least that's from where I'm coming from, all right? Why? Especially in education. Your root in your education, in your district, on your campus, you're a root to that tree. And all of you guys should be flourishing or should be drawing energy and water to the same tree, meaning the culture and the campus, the culture and the climate of the campus should be all in agreement that we want this school to be the best it can possibly be. And the only way that's going to happen if I am the best I can possibly be. That means what was said earlier. You have to check yourself, your prejudiceness, your prejudice, your discrimination, your habits, and they may be there subconsciously. You may not even know, but you got to say, okay, what can I do to make sure that I'm the best I can possibly be to help these students be the best they can possibly be? Because these are the facts. If you're a good person, you've done some good for people for the rest of their life. That tree's gonna flourish for the rest of their life. And if you're not, if you drop the ball somewhere, right, you've caused damage from somebody, somewhere, for the rest of their life. You gotta think about those things, right? The rest of their life. So if you think about what you ought to do for other people, right, your character will take care of itself. And that just means if you're doing it because you have this personal feeling of, I just want to help people, not, yo, I'm going to help people. Can you see me? Can you see me? I'm helping my students over here. Check me out. Then you're doing it for selfish reasons. But if you're doing it and nobody notices it, trust me, it doesn't matter. You'll never have to wonder what people think of you when they look at you, because what you believe and who you are and your actions, they all align together. So I'm challenging each and every one of you guys watching to do better. And if you're doing great, great, do better. And do what I mean by do better is to take a good hard look into that mirror every day and say, yo, am I doing what I need to do to make sure that they, the students, my kids, are doing what they need to do?
Dee, thank you so much. And thank you to all of our presenters, to Monique and to Laymon, to T, Ricky, and again to Dee. So we've got a few minutes. It's 7:51 p.m. And so I want to, we've had such a great evening. We still have one more person than even when we started. So this is unprecedented. We've had zero attrition tonight. I'm amazed and I'm very pleased. I see so much love in the chat. I don't think I've seen any questions necessarily. Allison or Jeff, have you seen any questions pop up that maybe I've missed?
No questions.
I haven't seen any questions, but to any of the panelists, do you have any children's books that you would recommend? I know a lot of us use children's books in our classrooms to teach powerful subjects, and I just wonder if you guys might have some recommendations for us.
Yeah, so I tried to get him on the call, the publisher of my last book, that kind of kicked off this new deal. He has a book called A Kid's Book About Racism. So not necessarily for middle school kids, probably about the younger age kids though, like 4 to 7, having this conversation with them, because it is a belief that a lot of kids are taught racism, which is probably true. And so getting kids to understand at a very young age that, yes, you have friends who do not look like you, who are a different race, but we still treat them with love and respect. So A Kid's Book About Racism, it is on back order, just like my book is, but it is popping off across the world right now, especially given the times that we are in. But yeah, I would definitely check that out.
Laymon, thank you. And Laymon, if you could, in the chat, if you could put the title and author of that book, we would appreciate it. Megan asks a question: how do you deal with racist staff? And it's unfortunate that we even have to mention that, but I was just, I was looking at Dee's Facebook post recently, Dee, you posted about that educator, I think it was in Texas, and she resigned right away. She had posted some pretty awful things on Facebook, and if you espouse those beliefs and you work in education, why you would post them publicly is a mystery to me. But how do you address our colleagues who maybe don't have these same, just aren't exploring this, aren't asking these questions? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think that you would do anything else. Like if you saw somebody, beating on your kid, you step in and you go, hey, that's not cool. Like what's happening, and you interject. It's not enough to be anti-racist. It's not enough not be racist. We have to create a culture where being racist is uncomfortable, right? And I feel like that teacher, or I'm not going to say teacher because no teacher would do that, but that person who just happened to, be hired at that school, felt a comfort to say those things. Like, I have enough people behind me. I have enough people that I've talked to that agree with this, that if I do post this, I don't feel, the backlash, right? And, I've been in a teacher's lounge. You guys have been in a teacher's lounge. You've been in the office. You've heard some things that were kind of like, you wouldn't say it per se, but, you're kind of like, I'm going to get out of here. I'll make my lunch real quick and I'm going to get out of here. I don't think we can no longer do that, right? I think we have to not attack it, but I think we have to address these things head on. And if you have a colleague that is racist, you have to make it difficult for them to teach there. You got to bring it up, and you have to go up the ladder and say, hey, this is what I saw, and it's no different than teacher-student relationships. It's no different. Being racist and saying racist things and having hate towards any group, Black, Hispanic, the homosexual, it doesn't matter. Trans, it doesn't matter. All those are infractions. All those are things that need to be addressed like immediately and cannot be allowed on a school campus with kids.
You have to get comfortable making people uncomfortable with their uncomfortable actions and thoughts, right? Like I remember being at a school, I was subbing at a school during my doctoral program, and I was in a freshman class, and there was a young girl, white, who said to another Black kid, my mom said I can't date your kind. What do you mean your kind? And you're 14 years old using that type of language. That means that you heard it from someone. And there are people on your campuses right now who use that same type of language when they are describing kids that look like me, Dee, Monique, and Ricky, kid. Right? They like your kids, those kids, them, they. Like, what do you mean? And so you have to get comfortable with calling that out. We're in a time right now where we live in a fishbowl, and I tell student leaders this all the time. Like, what you do, how you do it, how you say it, how you act, how you dress, everything about you, somebody is watching. When going back to what I said to you all earlier, you not saying something leaves space for other people, whether right or wrong, to believe whatever they do. So if I am saying negative things on your campus, you don't call me out, I think it's okay for me to do it, and I'm going to continue to do it in front of you until you say something to me. So today, moving forward, be uncomfortable with calling that nonsense out, because it hasn't been checked. You are in the positions that you are to be able to do that. And I think you have to use your voice and use it in a way where it's not like mean, but what do you mean by that? That statement that you just made, what do you mean by that? Like, really probe them, and people will realize, you know what, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have said that. And it'll have them check them. Like, some people need to do a checkup from the waist up. They need to check their heart. They need to check their mind, check their ears and what they're seeing, because what everyone sees is not the same. And you all play such a huge part, but you have to be willing to use your voice for the right way, or use it in the right way.
And I'd like to piggyback on that and not rely on the write-up system to address the racism that you're seeing on campus, because laws can't protect those they weren't written for. And in any system that we are looking at, laws weren't written to protect, to support, to educate Black and brown children. So when you're seeing these things happening on your campus, imagine a person of color being the leader of the school, wanting to write up the teacher that said that, oh, because we have a Black principal, I thought we were doing more to help the Black kids. Of course, I want to write that person up, but then I have to sit and be humiliated in the conversation of, oh, well, I didn't realize that was offensive, or, oh, I didn't realize that this. And so looking at what you do, what you say from a lens of, if this was said to my kid, if this was said to my family member, would I be offended? Would I take offense to it? And again, being a leader of a school, that's where those questions, those self-reflection questions that I had in my first slide came in. And how do people experience you? And sometimes you have to split that conversation up. And how do Black kids experience me? How do Latino people experience me? How do Indian people experience me? If you have to separate that out, again, like that reflection goes back to your core. So instead of maybe sometimes hiding behind the excuses that are made of, oh, I don't know, this is implicit, I'm not quite sure, but calling it out for what it is, being comfortable, being uncomfortable, as everybody has continued to say. And again, not relying or thinking that it's the responsibility of the people of color on your campus to fight that fight. Like, you see it, you hear it, you say it, you call it, you reach out, you be that change maker, and you have that courageous conversation with your colleague. Because the write-up system, yeah, it's not really designed to protect race. It's designed to protect some racist act in falling behind of, I didn't know. And it's very insulting. So if you see it, you hear it, you feel it, you notice it, say something, do something, be something. If you're outside protesting, then when you see it in the teacher's lounge, when you see it in the classroom, when you see it in boardrooms, wherever you are, on Facebook, like, call it out for what it is, and really seek to really help somebody reflect. Because again, it's a change behavior.
I mean, I would ask the question, why don't we call it out? And that's to everyone that's in the room. What's stopping you from calling out what you see and know is wrong? Is it,
well, you know what, Laymon? There's that snitches get stitches mentality, And then I was reading one of the comments that said, hey, I'm considered radical. Yeah, because I call out people. So you guys got to understand, and I've been trying to tell people this, and it's just been bouncing off their head, is racism is ingrained in this culture. You got to understand that. Like, if you cannot, and I'm not talking about you. A lot of people, they take offense because they think, I'm not racist. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about a culture as a whole, right? Racism is ingrained in this culture. So you are radical if you call out racism. You are radical if you say Black Lives Matter. You know what I'm saying? You are radical if you do things countercultural to any culture. You know what I'm saying? So on top of that, like, I wanted to, before Laymon hopped in, on top of what Monique had to say is, guys, like, at the end of the day, okay, if you don't check you, we're wasting our time. We can have 1 million of these every week. If you don't check you, we're wasting our time, okay? If you're not saying, what have I said that may have given Miss So-and-so permission to feel like she could say something too, right? We have to, at the end of the day, y'all, we got to think, dang, what have I said or not said? What have I done? Who have I picked out in my class and complained about constantly that gave Mr. X or Mrs. Y the okay to be like, okay, well, I got some students I want to get off my chest too, right? At the end of the day, y'all, it's not about anybody else in this room or on this call. Like, it's about the person that you're looking at in the screen. If you're looking at me, it's not about me, right? But for me, I'm looking at me. It's for me. I need to check myself. What am I teaching my kids at home? When they ask, like, yo, who's George Floyd? Am I saying, oh, he's some criminal that was trying to pass fake $20 bills and a bad cop killed him? There's a big difference in that conversation. And he was a man who died but shouldn't have, and that should go on to some other things. Who's Tamir Rice? Who's Trayvon Martin? Why are people saying I can't breathe? Why are there millions of people in 18 different countries out there saying Black Lives Matter, Mom? Like, why, right? And that's our chance to teach real history, but to also teach your kids to say, look, there are some people that don't like other people based on A, B, and C. But in this house, I don't want to get biblical on y'all, right? But as for me and my house, this is what we do, right? This is who, if you guys know that verse, right? We will say, like, I don't care what anybody else is doing out there, but in here, when you're under this roof, this is how we treat people. This is how we approach things. This is how we do things, because this is how I do things, right? And it's just all about you. It's all about you guys. We gotta change the conversation from you to I.
Can I jump in real quick? I want to make sure that I leave you with some practical things that you can do, not just philosophical things that we talk about, but some things that as educators you can do. One of the things that we are working on here for some of our back to school, getting kids ready and getting teachers ready and getting folks ready, is looking at a model called the Ohio Violence Prevention Project. It's an old model, but it's really highly effective. It gives people from different places, whether it's police and young people, or whether it's Black and white, or whatever those opposing forces are, the opportunity to be able to dialogue and be heard and to hear, and then to talk about strategies for moving beyond that. I'm happy to share that offline at another time. If you reach out, I'm happy to share what that model looks like. But I also wanted to encourage you as educators. This is a great time as you're preparing back to school lessons for you to think about some lesson plans that you can put into place. For example, I'll give you an example of my son in 7th grade. He had this project that literally changed his life. And he just brought it back up recently, and he's thinking about changing his major as a result of it. One of his teachers, his English teacher, decided to intersect English and history to almost do a humanities approach in 7th grade. And the kids had to read the Emmett Till poem. And then they had to do a contemporary project, which brought in the arts for those kids who are artistic. It had to have a historical component, and the kids had to have a replication 3 times. And my son is not very artistic or creative in that sense. But what he did was fascinating. He read the poem and he said, Mom, I got this idea. Can I borrow your wig head? And I want to give this to you as teachers, because sometimes we talk theoretically so much that we don't give you practical applications that you can do in your classrooms, that you can do with your ASBs, that you can do with your kids in everyday classrooms. But what he did was he took one of my wig heads, and he painted it brown. He put a mustache on it so that you would know it was male. And I didn't get it. He said, can you take me to Michael's? He got this cord. And he talks about how this teacher, Miss Eace, changed his life because as a white woman, she dared broach a subject called race. And it gave him a place as a minority in this classroom, a place to be seen and not viewed. And that's what he said. I didn't feel like I was in a fishbowl. I felt like all of my classmates were looking at this through whatever lens of life they were coming from. And he gave us a great point to talk. And then what he did for his replication is he took the thing and he took a piece of cord that he got at Michael's, and he put a noose around the neck, and he put a little label on it, and it said Emmett Till. He then took a hoodie from one of his jackets, cut it off, put the same cord on the string and tied it on the head of this wig head, and put a label on the string and called it Trayvon Martin. He then took a mortar board and put it on the head. And he took the cord and made it the same cord that he had tied the noose and the hoodie. He made it the tassel for a mortar board, and he labeled it Chris Street. And he said, I will, because they didn't get the chance to. But what he did was open up dialogue with his peers to talk about what it looks like to be a Black man, a young Black boy at that time in America. And his classmates, mostly white, were able to receive it, to hear it, and then to share. And those are some things that you can do that begin the dialogue with classes that make it, that meets all the requirements for your academic standards, that intersect English and history and the arts. It brings it all together for our kids. I just wanted to offer you all something that you could do, but I'm happy to talk with you offline about some strategies for how do we begin to have, as Ricky said, those critical and courageous conversations about race. There's a book called Something About the Subject Makes It Hard to Name. And so I want to encourage you with the quote by Audre Lorde, which I think is appropriate because Mo opened up with Audre Lorde. Audre Lorde was my lifetime mentor, and she died in 1992. And my favorite quote from her says, and it's a part of a poem called A Litany for Survival. And she says, when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard nor welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive. That's it. That's all for me.
Dee, thank you. All right, here's Monique. I see your hand up.
Yeah, no, there was a student had a question about how to get his peers to care in the chat, and I just wanted to address that question. Giovanni, thank you for being here and really wanting to be part of this conversation. One thing I would say for you to do is you just mobilize. You know, if you talk, if you speak out, you speak up, you know what you want to do, you know how you feel. Know that there is always more than one person that is on your campus that feels that way and that is maybe afraid to speak up because of that fear of not everybody wanting to be part of it. You continue to share the message and you will get followers. People will mobilize. People will continue to want to see something different. So that's one thing that I would give to you is that you don't stop caring because nobody is caring. When you become a leader, there are many times that you stand alone and it's scary, it's frightening, and you feel like you might lose friends. But if you're standing and for something that you believe and that something that humanizes people and you know is what's right, then you keep standing. You keep standing and you will have people that will continue, that will fight, that will hold you up, that will stand by your side and continue that fight. And slowly but surely, folks will get on the right page. It just takes time. And that's why they say this isn't a sprint, this is a marathon. And that marathon is going to continue in every aspect of your life, whatever table, whatever space you choose to be in, it's going to follow you. And you'll have to stand alone sometimes, but stand firm in what you know to be true and what's right.
And don't you ever give up in this journey, because the most frustrating thing, I think it was Janelle Moon's conference, and it was around a time, I forgot whose death it was, but we were at a church and Black Lives Matter's topic came up, and there was a 9-year-old boy, young middle school kid, I think. He asked what my thoughts were on Black Lives Matter. And I asked him the question, well, what do you think about it? And he said, my parents told me I shouldn't worry about that. And that struck me, because here we are putting a stifle on a young man who has an opportunity to grow and be someone. And we have such a huge role to play in our positions, in our lives every single day, that we are raising the next generation of young people who I believe would dramatically shift this country if we don't keep the lid on top of them. And the thing is, you as a young person have so much power. You might not have 10 followers that believe in your mission, your thought process, but you have 5. And those 5 have 5. And like Monique said, this is not a sprint. This is a journey. We've been fighting this cause for a long time. It's frustrating. In my neighborhood where there are $250,000 homes, I have to walk down the street and people post on our social media website, there's a black guy walking down the street. I live in a $250,000 home and not even safe in my own neighborhood. Or when I'm in the car and I get stopped because I look the way I do. Or I have somebody tell me that you're one of the good ones. What does that even mean? Or my uncle tell me that you would never put yourself in a position to be killed. We don't put ourselves in positions. And this came from somebody who was Black. And so you wanting to have a voice, wanting to do something means a lot to me. I'm sure it means a lot to Monique, to T, to Ricky, as well as Dee. Don't give up and don't let anybody stop you from being on the right side of things.
I think that, you know, we're all here, and the reason why those numbers didn't go down, Ron, in the beginning is because everybody here knows there's a problem. You know, I don't think there's anybody on this call that doesn't believe there is a problem, unless you have nothing to do. So you figure, hey, I'll just hop on. But I think that everybody realizes that there's a problem. When you look outside your window and you look on the news, you see a diverse group of people, because we're starting to wake up and realize that this is a problem. And if we can have Pokemon Club, and we can have video club, and we can have violin club, and we can have anime club, we can have an anti-racist club where people go to learn, where teachers and students get together after school and go, yo, how do we learn? Well, we bring in diverse speakers and we share stories and things like that. Because, and it's not just, and I don't want anybody to feel attacked, but when we talk about racism, it's not just white people, right? You guys got to understand that, you know. I because of the things that I've gone through, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have any prejudices of my own. Like when a news story pops up, and you know, unfortunately, it's just like, hey, school shooting. I'm sitting there like, probably a white dude, right? Just because that's what we're in. When a news story comes up and say, hey, burglary on da-da-da, so on and so forth, in my head, I'm like, please don't be a Black dude, you know? So these experiences that we have, this is a toxin. This is a toxin. It is starting to poison people's minds and corrupt people's souls in the way they think. That's a problem for everybody. So when they say, oh, that's not my problem, yeah, it is. Because we're starting to think certain ways. There was a question that was posed to me the other day. I was talking to my family, who a lot of them are in law enforcement. And he said this example. He was like, oh, you know, like a white lady, she goes, you know, I support the cause. I donated to Black Lives Matter. And he says, well, what if they start moving in your neighborhood? And she was like, think about that, right? Yeah, go out there. Let's get these civil rights. Just, you know, y'all start moving in my neighborhood, my $250,000 $250,000 home, then you might be on the neighborhood watch, but yo, go protest. And that's why, again, we have to check ourselves. You know, there's a difference between supporting something, but hiding something in here. That's just like, I still clutch my purse a little tighter when a group of Black dudes walk by me, who could be one of the good ones, who could be da-da-da, this and that, who lock our teachers, that lock our doors. Because we're like, well, you know, I've been to some schools where I leave my video stuff, my backpack, and some teachers are just like, you might want to take that with you, you know? And she doesn't mean it in a negative way, but through like culture, you know, through like whatever the system is that we're talking about, you start to think that way. You know what I'm saying? So we just, man, we keep asking how. We keep asking for practical stuff. Like, y'all, it's you. It's you. It's you. It's you. It's what you would do for your own children. And I want you guys to think about that. What would you do with your own children if they were getting bullied every single day, or they came home crying every single day about some kid talking about them? Man, like, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry. I know I'm getting frustrated, but it's just like we're stuck in this practical stuff. Give me practical stuff. What would you do for your own children, your own flesh and blood? What would you do? What would you say? Do that. Whatever you would do for your own kid, do that. Because this is the reality. If you're an educator, those kids that walk into your classroom every day are your kids. They're your kids. For that 30 minutes, for that 60 minutes, they are your children. And they are counting on you to do the right thing. To do the right thing. You're the only mom some of these kids have. You're the only dad some of these kids have. Some of these kids have a stronger relationship with their coach than they ever will a parent. That's how important you are. So when we talk about education, when we talk about being a teacher, like, you guys got to understand, man, that carries a lot more weight than you think. You can do a lot more good or a lot more damage than you think. We trust you. Like, I just, man, yeah, you guys are parents, man. Like, get into parent mode. And if you're not a parent, what would you do for your nephew? What would you do for your grandchildren? Like, come on, y'all, this is easy. This is really, really easy, because it's a human thing, not a black and white thing. If we start looking at it as a race thing and we start getting defensive, like, well, it's not me. Like, I treat everybody good. We're not talking about that. I'm talking about what would you do for your own flesh and blood? Because if they're on campus, if you represent a school, if you wear a shirt, if you're a director, if you're a part of a school, every student that enters on your campus is your kid, and they belong to you for that 6-8 hours, whatever the case may be.
Well, respectfully, I would argue that, so what if you do it for your kids, if you don't do it for the people in the grocery store, if you don't do it for those people who do move into your neighborhoods? At the end of the day, it's so much bigger than just what happens in our schools. What happens in our school is simply a microcosm of what happens in this culture. And so I just really want to encourage us to, as you said, take a look at ourselves. But at the end of the day, I want us to do something. And what that means is taking whatever our beliefs are in our hearts and our thoughts and our minds and transforming those into things that make a difference in the world. But Giovanni, I did want to say to you, I say this in my speeches all the time, the greatest social movements of this world, of this country, have been led by its young people, starting with the Revolutionary War and moving itself forward to the suffrage movement, to the civil rights movement, to the Black Lives Matters movement. Keep fighting, Giovanni, keep fighting. Guess what? I love to see the activism of America's young people. I always close with my speeches with saying, America is calling her young people to leadership. The question is, will you answer the call? No matter whether your friends pick up the line or not, you still got a direct line to activism and to leadership, whether it's in your school or in your community. And this nation will never be its best until its young people rise up and realize that the power for creating what we want to see rests with us, and it rests with our young people. So Giovanni, I'm so encouraged by the fact that you're even on this call and that you really want to be looking at what you can do. And I will say to you, stay in the battle, even if you're standing alone. I think it was Laymon earlier who said, yeah, sometimes standing by yourself, or it was Mo, standing by yourself is lonely. And it's okay to be lonely, because sitting in silence is lonely too. So you get to choose which one will you do. But at the end of the day, I assure you that if you step up and you raise a voice, other people will come alongside you and raise a voice with you. So I just wanted to say that to Giovanni, because at the end of the day, the work that I do really is focused on this generation that is coming, because I placed in there's a line from a song that says, we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. And it says, to me, young people come first. They have the courage where we failed. And if I can but shed some light as you carry us through the gale, we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Thank you, Giovanni, for being willing to carry old heads like us through the gale.
And I like to say, I'm sorry, Ron, can I one more before you
Go
close
for
this
it.
out?
Go for it, yes.
just for our adult leaders, you know, just because this movement is the movement of the youth, we still have to be in positions, and we still have to show them how to lead this movement and how to move. And I mentioned about the write-up system and these laws and these things not being designed for Black and brown kids. That's where we come in. That's where the adults come in. That you look at your union representation. You look at where can I affect these changes within our union representation? How do they get to our district representation? How do they become policy? And it's one thing to come policy, but we always know that with that policy, a policy can be written, but the consequences for breaking that policy are not strong enough, then that policy is just going to continue to be words, and it's not going to be acted upon. So as we're encouraging the writing of policies and how we are having our campuses being, we're changing our mission statements and our vision statements. Let's understand that as we are writing those policies, stand steadfast in what needs to be changed. What are these consequences? And we all know that the only consequence that really affects people, that makes people change, is the economic, is the loss of job, is the loss of income. That's what gets people to actually want to change. So please, as you are trying to figure out what's your role in this space, you do have an obligation to your students. You also have an obligation to the profession to make some, to call on some folks to make some serious changes about what policies are in place and how they affect all people on your campus, all community, not just a certain group. So just know that there are those things for you to do along with educating yourself. Be stand up. You stand, and sometimes you might stand alone in speaking to your union and speaking to administration and speaking to district admin, board, your board of education. You know, because there are changes. Policies do need to be changed, but with those policies, those consequences also, in order if we really want people to move in a space. And that's sad, but we all know that that's how people operate. They operate through the money. So it's just something to be mindful of, and don't stop that fight either, because our students, our kids that are in our classrooms, that are in our schools, they're learning from us. They're watching us mobilize, and they're learning by what they're watching us do. So be bold, stand up, be well, stay encouraged. Don't give up the fight. Don't quiet down when the protesters go inside. Don't quiet down when we defund police. That's not enough. It's not enough. So continue to fight the fight.
I want to say a big thank you to all of our presenters. Thank you so much. Thank you. Before we get going, my goodness, because it's almost 11:30 p.m. for Laymon and for T and for any of our other Area H friends who are over on the East Coast. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time. There were a couple of presenters who said, you know what, I want to keep talking even after we formally close. So for those of you who want to continue this conversation, we're going to continue after, but we do want to say a couple of things. I want to kick it over to Allison in just a moment because we do have some other conversations coming up. But one of the things I will say to speak to what Monique said and to speak to the points that Dee was making, and I saw Richard in the chat, Richard Parkhouse. One of the things that you can do tonight is you can email your principal and ask, how are equity and social justice going to be included in your professional development plan for this coming year? Because I know that my principal just emailed earlier today and said, well, the district just threw the old PD plan out the window, and we're going to be addressing equity and social justice. And I thought, well, hallelujah, thank you. There was somebody forward thinking in our district who thought that was going to be a good priority. So how will, if you're a parent, email your school's principal, how are equity and social justice going to be a part of the professional development plan for the upcoming school year at your school? Because it has to start from the top down, right? I'm looking at Principal Monique Walton right there. It's got to start from the top down, because if the principal doesn't, if the first thing you get back, whether it's going to be a Zoom call or in person, we all get back as educators into that space, and we get back to school. And if the first thing out of their mouth is, all right, so here are the test scores, and how are we going to, we've missed it. We've missed it. So anyway, those are my 2 cents. I do want to hand it over to our CADA president, Allison Gadig. Talk to us, Allison.
Hey, you guys, I just want to thank all of the presenters. You've been incredible tonight. I want to thank you for your honesty and your candor with us. This is really what we needed. It's the best birthday I could have had, spending it with all of you and you sharing with me how I can be a better educator for all of my students. And, you know, you've really given me food for thought. I was downloading books, ordering books on Amazon. Hope my husband didn't hear that. And, and I've got some movies to watch this week too. So you guys are incredible. Thank you so much. This was my most important presidential goal, that we tackled this topic and we started to learn and educate ourselves more. So thank you to each and every one of you for being here tonight. I do want to let you know that we've made a commitment to our speaker sponsors that over the next month and a half, month and a half, we're going to be putting on a different topic every Monday night. And our sponsors are going to be able, our speakers are going to be able to sign up. They're going to be a little less scripted and, well, not scripted, that's not the right word, but a little less formal. And they're going to be informal conversations. And there'll be a panel of 3 or 4 of our speakers each night. So I wanted to let you know that CADA never sleeps. So in July, this is our what we're going to be doing in the first week of August. That very first topic is going to be on equity. So we're going to continue this conversation that night on July 3rd. And then today you all got, if you're a CADA member, you all got an email with a link to it, because we want, and this came from our speakers, they want to know what you want to know about, and they want to address those topics. So if you could please fill out that survey today or tomorrow. I know it's late, so a lot of you want to get to bed or go watch one of these movies that we just talked about. But if you would fill that out, then that will help us to let the speakers know what you want to hear about and what, you know, what is important to you right now. So we will push out an email probably sometime next week with our top choices and let you know what those topics are going to be, but we'll be with you all summer. So hang in there, take care, pick up the fight, carry on, educate yourself, and write to your principal. Thanks, Ron.
All right, folks, thank you so much. If you're looking for the socially appropriate time, like, can I stand up now? This would be a socially appropriate time to do that, and especially if you're on the East Coast. If you need to get your sleep, then we totally understand. But we also, you know, we told our speakers, our presenters before we got started, you know what, if you want to continue this conversation and if people still have questions, then this is a great time. And if you want to raise your hand and like actually, you know, rather than putting it in the chat, if you actually want to like speak and have your voice heard, then this is a great time to do that. If you'd like to share anything, or if you have any other ideas that you'd like to share, this is a great opportunity. Or go for it. Laura Saldana.
Oh, I just had a question for Mo. Mo, when you were talking, you were saying that we really should look at our activities and the things that we do and how we're leaving people out, especially, you know, our Black students. And I'm wondering if there are any examples you can think of things that we might be doing as an ASB that we're not realizing, that we're like unintentionally leaving people out, for lack of a better word.
I think one thing that you can do is always look at your leadership class and see, do I have representation of everyone on campus, of all cultures, not necessarily just ethnic cultures, but do I have the bad kids? Do I have the not so good kids? You know, like do I have a good representation of everyone on campus? That's one. Two, I can give a couple of examples. One year we wanted to do Battle of the Sexes, girls versus guys, and a couple of my transgender students came to me and said that it was inappropriate, like they felt disrespected. And so immediately what we did, we said, well, you know what, let's do this or that. Instead, we kept the same dress up days. We just changed the wording to this or that. So did you prefer Barbie or G.I. Joe? Did you I can't remember them all, but it's just like, and really just watching how you are naming your activities. Another thing would be even like for Halloween costumes, or for like powder puff or something like that. Be careful of how students are depicting African American Black students. Like, what are we seeing? I definitely don't want to see the blackface. We don't want to see the silly things where we think are really cool. So really kind of naming out like what type of rules that you have for any of the dress up days. I think those are two things off the top of my head that I know I look at. Even something so simple as like your class shirts, like when you're doing class shirts for your students, understanding that many of our Muslim ladies, they can't show their arms, so making sure that you have a long sleeve shirt or a sweatshirt hoodie option for all students, to make sure that we aren't just centering or focusing on a particular group of students. And I get into a lot of like the grad nights and the proms and the amount of money that it costs to do different things. I would just say to really try to find ways with that your staff, that community, that you have like a little pot that you're able to provide for students who might not be able to afford some of those events, but really want to be part of it. Those are just a few things. That was a lot, but a few.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Laura, this is Francis. Can I add to something Monique was saying? Monique and I, when we first worked together, Monique, it was exactly 10 years ago that you were in that room interviewing. One of the things that really helped us break down some barriers was, for many leadership classes, there are requirements to become a member or to enroll. And one thing we did, Monique and I, was get rid of GPA requirements to be in leadership or elected positions. Leadership is not tied with grades. And if students had Fs, we would kind of watch them, put them on probation. But what it did was it actually made it feel like it wasn't this circle anymore of just successful kids. It brought more kids into the mix. And it actually improved for many of the students who joined. It gave them motivation to even do better in academic classes. So if we take a look at our own policies for like our leadership constitutions, that's one first step, because, you know, it's kind of like sometimes our government, we look at it and it's like, you know, I can't be part of that. And we have to break that down. So for any of us that still have those type of GPA requirements, grade requirements, unhinge it, just take it off, give kids a chance. And then you'll get more voices in there making decisions, sharing what they want from their programs. And Monique and I had a great 5 years breaking down all those barriers. Thank you.
To add to that, with what Francis said, with my school, when I went to Kraemer myself, all of a sudden I went from a school where I was one of the only Mexicans, and then all of a sudden I went to Kraemer, like, whoa, I'm the majority now. And so it was a sort of a culture shock. And now being at Kraemer, it's definitely more diverse because of our GATE population. Since I've been at Kraemer, like over 20 years ago, they pushed this GATE population. So now we have a lot of Asian, we have just a big variety. But I noticed when I inherited my current ASB class, guess what? It was mostly GATE and honors. The ELD kids weren't represented. The low socioeconomic students were not being represented. So what I did was I had to make it a point to explain to the teachers when they to the teachers, like, I want a class that's a cross section of my school. I learned that from the web program or Boomerang project. You need to get a diverse group, so cross section of your school. You do your best to make it representative. So when I send out my teacher recommendations to these or evaluations to these teachers, I tell them, I do not want, just a 4.0 student does not mean you're a good leader. I've had a lot of 4.0 kids. They're not natural leaders. Guess what? Some of the students that are at risk, they are great leaders. Kids that are gang members, if you think about it, they are good leaders. They know how to set up a family. But guess what? They're non-conventional. We need to teach them a different direction. And so I've had a lot of successes. with students who were not sure whether to apply. So I actually emailed teachers, and I got this from Monica, I think Anderson, who's in CADA. I might be mixing up her name, but she said, email your teachers of recommendation, or like just email your teachers and say, which kids do you think would not apply, but they're not sure about applying, but you think they'd be good later. So I send them personal letters. And a lot of times I tell those teachers, tell me the kids that are at risk, and maybe I could put them in my class. And I've had a lot of successes with doing that. So going with what you just said right now, it's huge. We need, and plus we need that representation. So like with my school, I want them, like I want an at-risk kid to get an at-risk kid to come to my dance. I want them to participate in my lunch activity. Because if they see them participating, it's kind of like that representation. They see it, they're more likely to get more kids to participate in it. And then
Ricky, I would say that those kids are leading on your campus.
Exactly.
And their voice needs to be heard. What aren't we doing? Why are those kids not getting involved? What do we need to do? We need your voice in ASB. Our ASB classes need to represent the culture. And a lot of times they don't.
They don't, because it's so easy for us to pick a kid based on the 4.0 GPA. And guess what? To explain to a parent, and I have to do this all the time, your child did not get in, and then they see another kid who's at risk get in, they don't understand that. And it's a tough conversation, and I've learned, don't answer an email, have a phone conversation, and it doesn't always work, but you know, at the end of the day, like, we need to have representation, bottom line.
Hi, this is Cheryl. Can I jump in? Cheryl Rivera.
Cheryl,
I'm not a activities director, but I work with them. And one of the things that we don't do enough, and I know that when we started looking at, there weren't Black and brown kids in our AP classes. You would go in the classroom and you saw only Asian population, and we're like, what's going on here? And talking to the kids, they're like, well, I don't know anything about it. I don't feel comfortable. I don't see anybody there who looks like me, that kind of thing. We did have kids go in and shadow, like go in and see what it's about, and look, and they sat in the class and, you know, came out and said, I think I can handle that. And I think that that would be another way of doing it with ASB. Have the kids go into an ASB class, because they don't know what it is, and just to talk about it doesn't really give them a clear picture, other than they see kids painting around campus or things like that. And so a shadow would be, it's kind of a good tool to get kids more engaged, you know, have someone bring them in and let them see what it's about. I think the hardest, I know Francis talked about inclusion, what he did at the other school. And the hardest piece for me, having been involved with activities all these years, is inclusion of our special kids, our special ed kids. Putting them in those classes is really difficult, because the kids that are generally in there aren't very accepting of some of the disabilities that those students have, but they're part of the campus. And I think that should be a push to make sure that they're part of everything that's going on campus as well. So that's my
Richard, Cheryl, thank you so much. Richard, you've been waiting patiently. You wanted to speak to this as well.
Thank you, Ron. You know, we hear a lot about privilege, and we also need to take a look at our most vulnerable. In a lot of cases, our ASB are perceived as being the privileged on our campus. So I think that a great dialogue to start that can parallel what's going on within our society is to start talking about who has privilege on our campus, in terms of thinking about our recognition assemblies, thinking about who gets involved, who are we designing activities for? Are we truly designing those activities for the privileged on our campus? Or are we really trying to branch out and taking a look at the most vulnerable kids on our campus? Because if we can truly reach the most vulnerable, then we're going to have the greatest impact, because we could be losing those kids. And maybe that will start that discussion where that could spin off to take a look at the privilege within our school, and then taking a look at the privilege within within our society, and then how that plays as well. So there's lots to think about that. So
with that, I've always been trying to push like the idea that if you're like ASB can do so much for those students. I've been to school where it's high. Parents make a lot of money. They got clothes that they'll never wear. Bring those schools or bring those clothes. Like, tell your ASB students, find out what especially people of color, find out what they need. If they need laptops, put it on a fundraiser, not just for prom, but to give, so-and-so a brand new laptop. Because what that's going to do for me is say, dang, my school actually cares about me, right? I don't have any clothes. Find out the student. Like, if you find out about your students, let them tell you their stories, find their needs, use ASB to meet those needs. You're going to automatically create like this sense of pride. Like, dude, my school came through for me. Your parents are going to be more engaged because they're thankful. It's kind of like, like Ellen. You watch these Ellen shows, man. Like, every time I watch Ellen, I'm like, yo, she just changed this person's life forever. And it doesn't have to be $25,000 from Shutterfly. You know what I'm saying? But it can be whatever need that is. There was a video that went viral. A white kid was getting made fun of. I don't know if you guys saw this. White kids get made fun of because he always wore the same shoes. So a group of brothers came along, pitched in their money, bought him some brand new Jordans, changed that kid's life forever. That's school. For me, that's school. And that's what school should be about. So if we're talking about ASB and what we could do, find out the needs of your students, especially, I don't really like the word at risk, but, especially those, everybody's at risk, but those guys, the ones that we're talking about, the ones that have the most needs, whether it's financial, sponsor some of them to go to prom. I don't know about y'all, right? But have y'all ever seen like a black dude lead anything? Like, it's full of energy. They draw people. They're dancing. Like, come on, man. You got to think of all the colored people on your campus at a dance. They're the most popular kids there when it comes to all the fun stuff. Why don't we take that talent and utilize it in ASB where it's front and center? We do cheers and we do all this stuff all the time. Like, let's just utilize what they bring to the table. Make them feel like, yo, I'm part of this school. Richard Parkhouse will tell you, I went to Walnut, there was 7 of us, you know what I'm saying? But every time we had a football game, bring Dee down. I was with their cheerleaders, I was banging on the drums, I was just doing what I wanted to do. They started to award me for that stuff, just being who I am. And for that, like, Walnut is my school, like, represent, like, I enjoyed high school. So it's finding the needs, using the talent, and not letting grades, because grades is another thing. Grades is at home stuff. And it might be because they don't have a laptop. It might be because mom works 3 jobs. It might be because dad's in prison or on the news for being shot. It might be. Those are your students, right? So we got to meet the needs of these students to make them feel like my school hasn't forgotten about me. And I promise you, coming from a foster youth perspective, if you can catch them where they can trust you, they'll do whatever you want, whenever you want. You got them fully because they find a home. And if you guys don't do it, the Crips will. And if you don't do it, the Bloods will. And if you don't do it, the drug dealers will. That's how we get them.
I'd like to, first, I want to address Alexis's question in the chat, because you were asking if we go by African American or Black, and I just tell you, you will talk to different folks, and we will say different things. I use them interchangeably. Sometimes I even just say I'm Creole because I'm more than just Black. But I tend to use African American when I'm in like a more formal setting. and I couldn't even give you a reason as to why. But if you ask me, I'm Black, and I will always say that I'm Black. So feel free to use them interchangeably, because that's kind of, if somebody says, oh, I prefer this, then great, thank you for letting me know. But yeah, we use them interchangeably. I do want, I like what we were talking about with privilege, and there's 2 points that I want to make, and I don't want to sound, well, I'm unapologetic, so I'm not even going to apologize in advance. The one thing about privilege, you know, I look at my own privilege, because I have privilege. I have a house, I'm a homeowner. I have a job that did not fire me or lay me off or follow me during a pandemic for multiple months. I have a car, I have degrees. I'm seeking my doctoral degree right now. But when I step outside my house, I'm Black, and it's a difference. My privilege goes out the door. It's a difference. And so be mindful of that. And even when we go in and we take it into our schools, be careful that you don't, tokens are for arcades. Tokens are for arcade games. And I say it all the time, because I always joke with people that I'm a token because I seem safe, because I smile and I'm happy, and I want to make sure that everybody's in a good space when they are with me, because that's just who I am. But I always sometimes joke about being that token. You want to be careful, be mindful that you're not making a Black person be that token Black person that has all of the answers within your leadership class, because we don't have all the answers. We don't know everything. My experience of being Black is something different than somebody else's experience of being Black. So really kind of understand that. And also, even when we try to empathize, I think is the word I want to use. There are several people that grew up poor, that grew up in, you know, bad neighborhoods, single family home. You can name all of the labels that people give. But if you didn't do it being a Black person or a person of color, it's a different experience. The poverty levels are different. And so again, it goes back to, you know, the adults really having that mindset of, and being careful that we're not also putting our Black students in, or people or students of color in positions of being the only one that has the answers, because you're the only one that's safe enough to be in our class and to answer these questions and to be here, because you fit the requirements within this application. I would have fit that requirement within that application. However, my experience is different than those that might be surrounding me. So definitely kind of be mindful of that, and not just having that one person, but have multiple that's representing. And just when we're having, tokens are for arcades.
And I would echo what you just said, Mo, that be careful. African-American people are not monolithic. We're not all the same. We don't all practice the same faith. We don't all eat the same kinds of foods. We're different, just like all white people are different. So don't assume that anything that you hear from one person is applicable to everyone else. For example, one of the challenges that I have with like some of the student leadership groups all across this country, having been everywhere, is that it's always the loud, rambunctious kids and the kids with big energies who are always considered the leaders. And there are people who are quietly effective who just get the job done. And we never tap those kids in the same way. And oftentimes, African-American kids are supposed to be those kids, those rah-rah kids. And my son is quiet, one of my sons, and the other one is not. We're not a monolithic kind of people, and so we shouldn't expect our kids to be that. And that's why it's important to treat them with the swath of, they bring culture with them, but they also bring some individuality when they come into the door, when they're coming to your groups. And one of the things earlier, someone was talking about having special needs kids in these classes, and that when kids are in the leadership classes, the students in those classes don't always treat those kids with kindness and respect. I would respectfully say that's a void in leadership of whoever's running that class. Because how can you be the leadership of the school, but you don't have kids who are sensitive to the fact that not all kids are like them? Why aren't your student leaders, not just around race, but around issues of ableism, around issues of gender identity? Why aren't your kids culturally competent if they are the leaders of your schools? That's a question that I think you all have to ask yourself, just like you're asking the questions of race. You know, my nephew's autistic, and he was the football manager, and he changed the culture of a school simply because he said, you know, he was good and the kids loved him. And one day the football team said, Christian, come eat with us. He said, no, come over here and eat with me and my friends. And he challenged the whole mindset of a football team, which was cultural. The new tradition in that school, which is the wealthiest school in the state of Ohio, the new tradition in that school is that the football team always eats with the special needs kids, because it's the expectation that those student leaders brought together. Not the administration required it, but students having an opportunity to get to know each other. And if you all are not having your ASB classes be places where all kids are welcome, then your kids truly are not leaders. And I hate to challenge that, but I'm going to say to you, then you have failed your students, and your students are not leaders if they don't create a climate and a culture where all kids in that school, and especially in your leadership classes, fit.
That's a good point. It's a really good point.
Mm-hmm. When I was at Logan, I had quite a few of our SDC kids in my class, and we developed a ASB office for them. It was outreach. They were the outreach commissioner, and it was their job to share all of the leadership events, activities. They shared it all with all of the special ed classrooms, so that all of the kids were aware of what the dress-up days were, what activity was going on, what was going on for Spirit Week. Like, they were informed. And allowing a student to hold that office gave them a lot of courage, and it provided them that leadership on their campus. And I started that back at Tennyson when I first started doing activities, and then was able to make it be into an ASB office when I got to Logan. And it was just, again, profound. And some of our leaders, that they're still leaders within their community, because they could be at the school until I think they're 23, and they continue to be in leadership and being. I actually had one speak at our area conference. He talked about his experience of being a leadership student, and he spoke for about autistic students, spoke for about 5, 6, 7 minutes, which is sometimes is unknown, is unheard of, and he loved every bit about it. It made his experience the best. So you definitely, the impact that you have on your campus, again, that's where you be bold, and you stand bold in making sure that all people are reflected and all people can benefit from the leadership class, because you guys you're the heartbeat of schools. We are the heartbeat.
I have a video up on my Instagram. I'm kind of like, I'm not drilling, but I am kind of drilling. It might be Chino Hills High School, so shout out to Chino Hills if you're in here. But they're within ASB. When it's ASB class time, they're all about it. They're working in groups, they're making it happen. But outside of class, they don't even talk to each other. You know, and all of them are just like, well, yeah, I hang with this person over here. I don't acknowledge this person right here. But when we're in class, we make it happen. When we're not in class, we're all over the place, which tells me that the culture of the school doesn't change. We're in ASB because we need electives. We're in ASB because our friends in ASB. We're not. So if we can fix the heart, right, the heart of ASB in the classroom, and get these guys to be more inclusive with one another outside of the school, then we can make it happen for the rest of the school. Because if, as an ASB, as a leader in your school, as a leader in your school, if you're not talking amongst each other, you're for sure not talking to anybody out there. You have one common goal in ASB, and if you can't interact with the people you see every day for fifth period, you can't tell me that you're out here talking to strangers. You're out here talking to the incoming freshman class, like, yo, what's up? If you're not even talking to other people. So we have to get students to be comfortable with just talking and accepting the differences within that small classroom. And yeah, that does reflect a lot on the leader. That does reflect a lot on the president. That does reflect a lot on the director. You know what I'm saying? Because if we're just collecting people to collect them and to get a job done, you know, we need prom done, make it happen. We need Sadie's done, make it happen. But they're not coming together as human beings. Then what is ASB really? But another club of privilege, right?
And I think it's important when you have to get that, what Dee is talking about, to get them comfortable with each other, is we have to make them uncomfortable. We got to let them understand each other's stories, because at the end of the day, I know that one of my GATE students, she was Asian, and then I had my Latino at-risk kid that I put in there. He ended up just loving her to death, because guess what? They were in a crew together and they had to put up a freaking game for the dance, and they had to spend so much time together, but then they ended up learning each other's stories, and they would do anything for each other. So I think it's huge. I think when it comes down to it, yeah, we could put them in our classes, but what are we doing to connect them? What are we doing to make this a cohesive group? And us as activities directors, us as teachers, as educators, we have to start pushing those limits. And it's uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable, but we gotta foster that with our students.
Folks, it is 9 o'clock. We've been going for 2 hours, and we are so grateful that we still have 33 people going strong. So thank you very much to everyone, to our presenters who are still around. Thank you so much. Before we take off, I did see Giovanni, and to Giovanni and to Alexis, to our two student attendees this evening. Thank you. Like, when we plan these, we plan them for educators. We assume that it's, designed for adults. So encouraging and inspiring to have kids, to have young people joining us. I did want to address Giovanni, because if you look in the chat, Giovanni said, there was a proposal to have like a diversity week or multicultural week. And some students said, well, what about White Day? And so, which, you can look at it a couple different ways. And I think whenever, I know just as a teacher, whenever I hear students say something like that, I look at it, Giovanni, as an opportunity to educate, as an opportunity to kind of remove some ignorance from people, right? So I would just throw out a suggestion. I know we're at 9:01 right now. Totally, if you're having a diversity week or multicultural week, celebrate your Italian heritage, your Irish heritage, your German heritage, Polish, Russian. Like, that is something that would be perfectly appropriate to celebrate. But if you start talking about celebrating white pride or white privilege, then that is something that we that is not an appropriate part of a diversity week or a multicultural week.
And Giovanni, maybe even pose the question to them that, how would that look? What would that day look like? And would it be harmful to people within our community? And if that is the case, then we probably shouldn't do it, because that's not the goal of our diversity week. And it's not what we are promoting or pushing. So back to what Mr. Ippolito said, maybe you go with your Italian heritage, your German heritage, like maybe you go with, what you represent, but put it back on them to see, is this the message that we want to share within our school community by doing this?
And ask them why they don't feel they're not a part of Multicultural Day. Like, why do you feel you're not a part, when we say diversity, why do you feel you're not a part of that? You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, ask questions, bro.
And Giovanni also, and this is to Alexis also, in those moments, please have your activities director with you when you are having those conversations, or an adult, because although we are telling you to stand strong and stand, you know, sometimes you stand alone, having conversations like that, you need some support. You need somebody that will protect you, that will support you in getting your point across. So please always make sure that those conversations that you do have with an adult, a mentor, or somebody present that can facilitate and guide if necessary.
All right. Folks, thanks again to everyone for joining us this evening. And at 9:04, I think we've set the record now for longest CADA Zoom event. So great to see everybody. And please join us. Check out cada1.org/corona for our upcoming events. Those will be posted soon. And just stay tuned to your email. All of us CADA members, stay tuned to your email for information about the next event.
And fill out that survey.
Yes, and fill out the survey. Folks, thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Jose. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Hey, Laura.